Let's get to Donald Trump potentially arresting me.
We in this FBI will go after with the criminals with a vengeance. We will not rest until we find every single seed, money, donor, organization, and funding mechanism that we have. And I want to echo the Secretary's comments on Scott Bessent, who's allowing us to map out these networks through their financial criminal activities, which has been going on for decades. And I would like to remind the American public, they built this disease temple.
Their criminal activities that they're talking about is directly constitutionally protected expressions, like political expressions. I just want you to understand that there is no circumstance where they are allowed to do this. Technically, if we're abiding by the constitutional protections set forth, the First Amendment is supposed to protect people from this kind of government overreach. In the United States of America, the federal government, or any sort of government really, is not allowed to monitor, or not monitor necessarily, but like just to compel your speech, your political expressions. And I mean, like, we have a maximalist position on this, okay? With the exception of like harm, immediate harm, whether it be threats or whether it be, I guess, like inciting a riot or something along those lines. Even then, it's like, given the First Amendment's protection is so high, like you have to clear a very, very, very high bar. You know, yelling fire in a crowded theater is the exemption that people use. The First Amendment itself, for the record, for those who don't understand it, is not a law. The better way to think about the Constitution is a law for the government, a law not restricting the average citizen's behavior, but instead it is a law that restricts the government from compelling the average citizen's behavior. Not even just the average citizen, by the way. The Constitution obviously expands to every single person on U.S. soil. Persons is the specific terminology that the founders, the framers used. The Constitution is a government document that is supposed to have limits to what the government can do. It's not about limiting what the regular people can do. It's about limiting the government.
It was not a good night for me. Let's just say that. It was not fun sitting in that jail, but I'm glad to see what has come of it.
They brought this pool guy, by the way, Nick Sorter, because he got arrested for, like, I think beating on someone.
Took this flag from that man that was burning it in the street.
Do you know who he is?
Oh, yeah, I know exactly who it is.
So why don't you give it to Pam? Give it to the Attorney General, and let's start prosecutions.
Once again, burning the American flag is constitutionally protected speech. And the Supreme Court has actually defended this constitutionally protected speech, just so you understand.
But nothing is guaranteed. And so what I want to see over the next 3.5 years is a full court press to dismantle Antifa once and for all in a meaningful way. I know, Andy, we talked before this about some ideas. That's really what we want to. I don't care what the media says. I don't care what Democrats say. They will never wake up to this fact. So we want the federal government to take as many of these cases as possible, look at the interstate travel between Portland and Seattle when it comes to these people who are committing violent acts, and hopefully in 3.5 years, they will be a shell of their former selves.
Very close to that, and it's Antifa and many others,
Yes.
unfortunately. There are many others, bad ones. Most have been named terrorist organizations. There are a couple that we're going to. But I think we've got it pretty well covered. But there are many others. But
every time people are talking about, like, Portland is a war zone, it's just really funny to just like tune into Portland and show exactly what's going on in Portland when they're like, Portland is a war zone, Army of Antifa, and then this is the Army of Antifa, and this is the Army of Antifa. This is what they're doing in Portland, the war zone. Right? But it doesn't really matter because, once again, if you just stay on the other side, you can be perfectly comfortable knowing that, like, Portland is on fire, knowing in your heart of hearts, knowing in your mind that Portland is, as a matter of fact, on fire. It happens all the time with protests in general, where you will see people go, the cars are on fire, the cars are on fire, it's completely out of control, they're burning the Waymos, and then you like will watch me go to a protest, the exact protest they're talking about, like Los Angeles is on fire, and I walk 3 blocks away and I go get a ice cream at like a Japanese ice cream restaurant. It is so difficult to cut away at these insane narratives, because a lot of people don't want to see the other side. They just want to continue being diluted. Now, under different circumstances, that would be fine. That delusion, that level of delusion would be fine, okay? As long as it just kept people scared and it's whatever. But now, after the government has expertly crafted this hysterical narrative, manufactured this outrage, they're using this narrative to continue ridiculous political prosecution, illegal political prosecution of people who are exercising their constitutionally protected, for now, constitutionally protected right to exercise their First Amendment rights, to protest against police, to protest against whoever the they want to protest against. That is the most fundamental American value. It is more fundamental an American value than racism is, okay? That is the most important, fundamental American value. There's a reason why it's the First Amendment. On top of that, this administration is obviously actively trying to create an alternative. This administration is actively trying to erode that constitutional protection. And this is going to hurt everybody, okay? A lot of people don't understand. They think, oh, those guys are simply, radicals. They're Marxists. They're this, they're that. Not realizing that it's not just the radical Marxists or whatever that these guys want to prosecute, even though that shouldn't be prosecutable regardless. Those guys actually want to stamp out any matter of political dissent. That's what they want to do. They want to go after all dissent. They recognize that they are unpopular. They recognize that they don't have the broad popular mandate that they thought that they had, or that they deluded themselves into believing that they had. So now the only alternative at a time when there is like an unprecedented wave of unpopularity, the only thing that they can do is basically force the issue. If you can't become popular with your policies, then you just make it so that it's illegal to demonstrate how unpopular you are, to demonstrate against the administration. That's precisely what's going on. How does he still have support for the people enforcing Trump's ridiculous orders? I mean, a lot of people in that position, a lot of people in the role of the police or even in the military are obviously used to just following orders no matter how silly it is, because the organizational unit revolves around breaking your autonomy down and making you a part of like a larger structure. It's so you become more compliant when people give you orders. That's at the heart of how the military operates. And it can be quite rewarding as well for a lot of people. It can be rewarding for a lot of people who, don't have that kind of structure in their lives, right? And need that kind of structure in their lives. But ultimately, that is the goal of the military. And that's why the military will at times do things that every single individual within the military structure will follow through on. It's organizational obedience.
The reason why there's such a big problem is because we have Democrats and a lot of people in the mainstream media refusing to acknowledge that they even exist, right? So how can we as a country begin to address it when you have large swaths of these people who are supposedly decision makers and people who are supposed to inform, they don't want to say that it exists. Because the common argument is like, well, they're not a real organization because there's no national leadership, they don't have national headquarters, so how can law enforcement go after a group that doesn't exist like that? Law enforcement goes after criminal groups that organize to rob banks or do smash and grabs. They don't have a registered LLC, they don't have official membership cards, they don't have a business address, but law enforcement still goes after them because they're working as a group. These people don't just show up.
Brother, it's because anti-fascism is not an organization. It is an action. You miss when Jack Posobiec said Antifa has been doing terrorism since the Weimar Republic when they were fighting actual Nazis. These people think opposing Hitler was terrorism. I know, because they're Nazis. And that's the only reason why you would criminalize anti-fascist protests. The only reason why you would ever turn around and criminalize anti-fascist protests is if you are a fascist. Antifa is not an organized unit, okay? Anti-fascism is an action. Anti-fascism is a principled action, okay? If you call out someone being racist, you can consider that anti-fascist action in that moment. If you go out and you counter-protest against fascist protesting, that's anti-fascist action. Okay, there is no like Antifa headquarters. There is no getting together and rounding up the troops and then deciding that we are going to operate in an organized capacity to go and do anti-fascist mobilization. It doesn't work that way. And not only does it not work that way, but even if it did, even if there was an Antifa organization, okay, even if there was a centralized anti-fascist organization, it would still be constitutionally protected. The American Constitution, as it stands, currently does not have any domestic terrorism tools that they can use to prosecute individuals who are getting together and gathering together and doing acts of political expression. Okay? Yet, the Trump administration is trying to change that. Now, this is such a maximalist position that you can literally have the Patriot Prayer and the Three Percenters and the Oath Keepers and things of that nature actually participate in mass demonstrations around the country. That is the reason, because the First Amendment makes it so that as long as you are not directly engaging in some kind of like violent or some kind of criminal action, then you can't prosecute them. He said the government goes after orgs that rob banks. I guess that means all banks are safe now. There's a difference, right? There's a difference there. That is a criminal element getting together to do a crime. It is, as of now, not a crime to protest. Thank you. That's the point. It is a crime to try and rob a bank. It is a crime to successfully rob a bank. It's even a crime to attempt to rob a bank. It is not a crime to organize a protest. It is not a crime to mobilize to organize a protest. Is it not only not a crime, it's a right. It is a constitutionally protected right. There is no constitutionally protected right to robbing a bank. There is, however, a constitutionally protected right to organize a protest. It is ridiculous.
So my plea to the entire administration, especially to the DOJ, is every single radical left-winger who is in front of the ICE facility in Chicago, in New York, in Portland, please make sure that you use the full force of the law to come after each and every single one of them, because it is us being soft on left-wing violence that has fomented all of the terror that we have seen in this country, and it is the left wing getting away time and time again with assaulting law-abiding American citizens that has led us to this place. So,
is this level of dick sucking allowed on television? Yes. And also, what's really remarkable about this particular type of dick sucking is that it's happening while the government is shut down. This is what they're predisposed with. The government's shut down, and what these guys are doing, instead of like trying to address that, instead of, I don't know, offering people additional funds, offering people additional subsidies so they can continue paying their unimaginably expensive healthcare premiums, but at least like manage it to a certain degree, because that's what the government is shut down over, for the record. Instead of coming to terms with that and then taking a fat dub, you know what I mean? Because Donald Trump could just easily be like, that's right, I love healthcare. Democrats hate healthcare. That's why we're doing healthcare. And then said, we're doing Trump care. I'm calling it Trump care, right? If he actually wasn't such a empty suit that is a servant of capital, that's what he would do. If he was truly the populist leader, that's what he would do. If he truly cared about even like advancing a nationalist project, like doing a nationalist project, he would offer at least like his base some treats. And I don't mean just treats necessarily, but I mean he would offer his base something, like some kind of financial leg up at a time when people are experiencing unprecedented levels of this affordability crisis. That's where we're at. He's not doing that. And instead, he's just offering the base red meat like this.
Network. We have identified dozens of radical organizations, not just the decentralized Antifa organizations, but dozens of radical organizations that have received more than $100 million from the Riot Inc. investors. These would be the lawyer groups. These would be the groups that advocate
what they're
for
talking about
calling,
here is like bail funds, right? People who set up bail funds specifically so that people who are arrested for not breaking any laws or anything, people who are simply arrested and detained can be quickly released, okay? That's what this is for. But they call it the Riot Inc. or whatever. They think it's
this
like
money helps fund
ACLU,
the Antifa.
Legal observers that are participating in the protests and are there specifically to the Lawyers Guild that specifically is there to look at violations. The National Lawyers Guild is there to write down violations of constitutional protections. They even consider Act Blue, which is like the funding vehicle for the Democratic Party, to be a part of this as well. It's just a payment processor. It's just so ridiculous. This well-funded legal org works to protect Antifa terrorists from prosecution, according to the Federalist newspaper.
But these are people that
there's a reason why they're covering this right now, by the way, because they want to go after every single organization that specifically works to ensure that people's constitutional rights are not violated. I'm sorry. If it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's probably not a cow, okay? If you are prosecuting people who are anti-fascist for simply engaging in anti-fascist demonstrations, if you are saying that anti-fascism is a terrorism designation, if you are actively trying to go after all of these other groups, all of these other like 501c3s, for example, that work to ensure the administration doesn't violate, every administration, by the way. These organizations are not, Democrat run or Democrat funded, by the way. These organizations also operate when the Democrats are in charge. The National Lawyers Guild and the ACLU and all these other like civil liberties, like civil rights organizations, human rights organizations work under every administration. They're agnostic. They're not specifically working when Republicans are in charge or anything like that. They were literally there when protests were happening on college campuses and the Biden administration was in charge and people were getting packed up. 3,500 people got arrested on college campuses for protesting against Israel. They were there. They're there to protect civil liberties for all Americans. That's what they're there for.
Yeah, I've just got something very short. I'm attacked every time I do my job.
I do find it
Leave
pretty
my house
crazy,
to go-
though, that like they're basically looking at the situation, right? They're looking at the situation and they're like, they did January 6th. A lot of these groups that participated in January 6th were responsible for other criminal acts as well, not just protests, but like straightforward incidents of like domestic terror, right? And these guys are looking at that and saying January 6ers are actually good. And that is not like a real insurrection. They were just simply visiting the halls of Congress, but maybe were a little too aggressive in their visitation. They expanded on their visitation rights and they must be freed. And Donald Trump actually got them free. He pardoned every single person. And some of those guys literally had to go back to jail because they were pedophiles, okay? But what's crazy is, on the one hand, those guys are good as long as you are doing an insurrection, like a legitimate insurrection at the behest of the president, the current president, then that's fine. If you're a brown shirt, that's fine. That's really good. On the other hand, however, if you are protesting against the administration, then you're bad. And you should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. You should be treated like a terrorist. You should be black-bagged and you should be arrested.
Sick.
It's ridiculous.
Antifa is heavily embedded in the homeless and housing nonprofit sector. In many cases, the homeless industrial complex is running cover for
Bro,
Antifa.
this is a real who's who
Antifa
for
is
literally
benefiting
all of
from
the
American
worst
tax
scumbags.
dollars based
It's
on the
basically
research
a real
right
who's
now
who.
that we're going to
If you've
use
ever appeared on a
to
Tyler Oliveira
put on
video,
the Democrat
if you've ever set up a
Socialist
grift specifically to talk about the dangers of Antifa, you have been invited to this panel. It's insane. Even this guy, who is like a relatively newcomer to this reactionary content slop industry, just a straight up clown show. Each speaker goes like this: "Hello, glorious President Trump. You are so beautiful and hot, and I love you. Antifa thugs insulted me, and it made me sad. And we need to make protests illegal. I'm so lonely. I'm a journalist, also, by the way." Lamau, one of these freaks just said Antifa deeply embedded in the homeless industrial complex. Like, it's crazy.
Really
but
is
once
us.
again, you can say whatever the
It's
you
some of
want,
them, but not too
and
many
it
of them,
blows
not enough
my
of them,
mind.
and
It blows my mind that you can say whatever the you want, and nobody is going to go, "Hey, I don't think that's true. I don't think what you're saying is correct. I don't think there's like a big homeless industry specifically benefits from there being more homeless people. Like, there is no homelessness industrial complex."
You have Democrat politicians that are saying it's just an idea, right? That's all this is. So it's just an idea. After all of this chaos, it's just an idea. Well, that idea has threatened to kill me and many of my friends that are here today. So, Mr. President, thank you so much for bringing this to the forefront. And
the guy talking right now, James Klug, is a YouTuber whose most popular video is not all Black Lives Matter. They have Asmold and the Twitch's hentai guy in the White House before long. Oh, for sure. The White House is bringing on straight up Nazi slop tubers. That is where we're at already. Like, it's one step removed from like having literal VTubers beaming in. Antifa's job is to literally make fascists afraid to do fascism. Antifa is not a organization, as we already talked about, but it's like anyone and everyone that takes it upon themselves to say, Nazis. It can be something as simple as that.
You know, President Trump, I just wanted to add this real quick, because you were asking which mainstream media outlet is the worst. What I think, it's any of them that decided to call Kilmar Abrego Garcia Maryland dad. Because when I'm out
there
to
you
these
go.
people,
There
you know,
it
they
is.
call him
This is not about like addressing a serious threat. This is about forcing this administration down your throat to say anyone and everyone that has ever criticized the administration or saw like the humanity of a random migrant that the admin decided was actually a scary MS-13 terrorist, you're going to get prosecuted. It's because these guys can't cope with the reality that they're like their narratives are not working. Their narratives, in spite of no adequate counter messaging operation coming from the Democrats, is still not reaching a broad enough base of support. So they just have to turn around and say, all right, well, if you don't with us, then you're going to jail. That's what
Trump
it is.
gonna come and
This
help us.
is straight up prosecuting discontent. Oh, you don't think I'm cool? You're going to jail. It's simultaneously fascist, but it's also childish, you know, if that makes sense.
What they see, for instance, I've never been asked to go on any other show besides Fox News. My clips go viral everywhere, but they've never even asked, like CNN's never asked, MSNBC's never asked. And a lot of times when I go to hotels, I'll stay and I'll watch like MSNBC.
Fortunately, their ratings are terrible.
Dude. You see? No, this is literally, I'm not popular. Why am I not popular? Please arrest these people. They've made me feel bad, and they don't use my clips. Mega manufacturers AI slop videos. Oh my God, we're not gonna make it. 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 These are the things that your parents who have no capacity to understand AI from like real videos are watching all over Facebook. This was one of the major problems that I brought up with AI and having more and more bots pollute more and more chatbots pollute every single social media platform is now polluted with these bots, and they just like deploy them in a unidirectional manner. Whenever there's an issue, they can just do this now. It's so I do not know how we are going to regulate this. I think if I was in charge, obviously this administration would never do that, but if I was in charge, one of the things that I would do is make it so that it's illegal to post an AI video without actually declaring it AI. There needs to be a watermark that says like this is an AI video, like a disclosure or something. There has to be a mandatory watermark, dude. It is so bad. I mean, look at what Chris Cuomo did the other day. And Chris Cuomo is a media guy. He should know better. Remember when he posted the AOC thing? When it was like so obviously, it had a watermark. Actually, now that I remember, that video had a watermark, and that dumb still posted it. That video literally said, this is AI. This is an AI video. And he still posted it. Oh my God, we are so cooked. I don't see this going anywhere good, man. I don't see this going anywhere good.
You're talking about the money funding these Antifa organizations, and somebody brought up Roy Singham, I think it was you, who, by the way, is married to one of the co-founders.
I want to mention something here. What is anti-fascists protesting against? They're protesting against this administration doing fascism. But on the other side, while these guys are trying to talk about how like the dudes wearing frog costumes or whatever are like dangerous terrorists, dangerous homegrown terrorists that must be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, maybe shot and killed by the military. On the other hand, what is ICE doing? What is the unit of the federal government, the armed jackbooted thugs of the state doing? That's a question you might have. So far, they've shot and killed an unarmed man, lied about the circumstances, shot a woman 5 times for obstructing their vehicle, roughed up elderly women, zip-tied small children, shot a clergyman in the face with a pepper ball, beat the out of a 79-year-old like car wash owner, okay, marched through downtown Chicago masked and armed. And also, they have not, and this is David Axelrod's brief summary here, they have not done the thing that they said they were tasked to do, which is going after the worst and the worst of all criminals. In the same time frame that since Donald Trump actually became president, ICE has also literally killed 17 people in detention. So as far as like which organization, if we were to even assume Antifa is an organization at all, which one is worse? It's not even a question. Of course people are going to complain about this. Of course people are going to yell about this. And I'll tell you another thing that's really fucked up. While they are focusing all of their initiatives, targeting people at factories, targeting people at courthouses, as in people who are following the letter of the law, right? People who are already in constant communication with the federal government. They're going to their immigrant court hearings and they're getting apprehended at their court hearings next to their families. While that's going on, the ICE resources and federal law enforcement resources in general, and this is their own admission, is being exhausted on doing that instead of investigating drug trafficking, sex crimes, and other various different crimes that are supposed to be dealt with by the federal law enforcement authorities. It is insane. It is insane to me that anyone and everyone still to this day makes it seem as though this is totally appropriate. Like, even if you care about law and order, okay? Even if you care about law and order, a lot of people understandably do, right? But if you're like one of those guys who's like, I want criminals to be punished, right? Because there's a difference between like, I want law and order and I really want to stick it to the real criminals, right? Even if you were duped by Donald Trump's initial assessment that the Brandon administration was simply refusing to prosecute the worst of the worst criminals and worst of the worst offenders, you should be frustrated right now considering that they're not doing that. Like, they are literally not doing that at all. They are just simply doing everything in their power to terrify black and brown people, terrify migrants, both documented and undocumented, terrify neighbors of migrants, both documented and undocumented. And in the process, because there's only a finite amount of resources that exist to do this, they have stopped actually prosecuting and investigating real criminals. It's insane, dude. It's hysteria that they themselves designed as a galvanizing force. The notion that like undocumented migrants are responsible for heinous crimes and whatnot. And they did that because they wanted to get votes. They wanted people to vote for them. They wanted people to go out and vote for the administration. So in the absence of like any sort of real problem that they could commit to solving, like the cost of living crisis, right? Which is a major driving force behind why Republicans voted against the pre-existing administration, against the Democratic administration, because they had experienced negative real wage growth for a year and a half under the Biden administration. So they were very frustrated and they felt like Kamala Harris was not adequately addressing these issues. A lot of people felt as though Kamala Harris was not going to represent the change that they wanted to see. And they foolishly thought the Republicans would represent said change. Now, of course, for some people, they do care about this like racist. They do care about prosecuting migrants because they're scared. They feel bad. They're worried. For others, perhaps they believed Donald Trump's false presentation that migrants were responsible for unimaginable shares of crimes, when in fact it was the exact opposite, right? When you look at the data, when you look at the actual data, that undocumented migrants are responsible for a lower percentage of crime per capita than natural-born U.S. citizens are. Significantly lower, especially if you factor in documented and undocumented migrants together, because these guys are also, remember, going after documented migrants as well. They're not just going after undocumented migrants. It is magnitudes lower, as a matter of fact. So they pay, the undocumented migrants and documented migrants alike pay taxes. They do not receive anything in return for said taxes that they pay. They work for pennies on the dollar. They work tirelessly. And then instead of getting their documentation cleared, because that's simply what this is. These people are not committing heinous crimes. They are simply not getting the proper documentation. They're not getting the proper paperwork cleared. Instead of expeditiously offering them the proper paperwork that they deserve to have to work freely on U.S. soil, the Trump administration has decided to punish these people. The Trump administration has decided to punish people just as pawns.